So we're going to move into our next session. I'm really happy to introduce our panel today. They're going to provide us a window into how a private school has implemented the interventions and supports that Chrissy discussed successfully. Our panel of private school educators and parents will share how they are using interventions and extra supports to meet student needs. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce our panel. Gabby Aragon will be the moderator for this session. She has also played a key part in planning this forum. Ms. Aragon is a student support specialist at St. Austin Catholic School. She also plays a key role with the Progress Center, where she is an educator in residence. So the Progress Center's educator in residence is comprised of a diverse group of dynamic educators who work alongside center staff to ensure stakeholder perspectives are represented in our center's activities. The educator in residence also develop a community, so they collectively tackle tough questions that are facing the field today and are valued by centered staff for their unique perspectives. They are truly our partners, our thought leaders, and our eyes and ears to the field. I'd also like to welcome Dr. Tara Savalos, who is a principal at St. Austin Catholic School. This year will be her 6th year as principal and 13th year with the school. Prior, Ms. Savalos was the academic learning specialist and director of curriculum at St. Austin Catholic School, where she was responsible for the dyslexia intervention, language arts curriculum coordination and professional development, RTI administration, school-wide accommodations coordination, and Title I management. Tara is a certified academic language therapist, a qualified instructor, and a licensed dyslexia therapist since 2010. She also has a master's degree in special education, specializing in dyslexia through Midwestern State University. Next, we have Barbara Kennedy. She's been teaching for 40 years. 13 of those years were in the public school system, and the others have been spent teaching at private Catholic school. She has taught 1st through 8th grade and served as an athletic director for a few years. And for about 5 of those years, she was a principal at the Catholic school. Ms. Kennedy's passion is definitely in the classroom. She loves to be with children to get them excited to learn and to take that learning into the real world. She believes there's nothing more satisfying than watching the kids have those aha moments. Ms. Kennedy has even been lucky enough to become co-workers with several of her former students. When she's not at school, she enjoys spending her time with her family and her 2 dogs. And finally, we have Lauren Paver. She is the parent of Brennan, who's in 8th grade, Quinn, who's in 5th, and Fitz, who's in 2nd. They all attend St. Austin Catholic School since pre-K. All 3 of the children have received intervention and support services on their educational journey. So as I said, today our panelists will unpack how supports and interventions are embedded not only in the curriculum, but also the school's culture. Panelists will share their experiences from a variety of perspectives, including the parents and teachers. Their conversations will stem from 2 main questions. How have you built a culture of supports and interventions at your school that puts the child at the center? And how are stakeholders included in many stages of supports and interventions? As I mentioned earlier, Ms. Aragon will be facilitating this thought-provoking discussion with her colleague. Gabby, I'm going to hand this over to you.
All right, so thank you so much for the introduction. My role as a student support specialist, I'm kind of the connector between the teachers, families, and students of our entire campus. Pre-K 3 through 8th grade. So I support with strategies and interventions, both in behavior and academic areas, and also working to directly teach students or teachers coping skills or meeting with parents. I kind of do All of those combined into one role for our entire campus, but I'm here not only for our teachers, our students, but also for our staff, and making sure that everyone has the resources that they need and the connections that they need. So let's go to the questions. So, how have you built a culture of supports and interventions at your school that puts the child at the center? And I think going to Tara, our principal, would be the best way to start, because she kind of has that umbrella overview of kind of where we've been and where we are now.
Thanks, Gabby. This has been a lifelong process for me here at St. Austin's. I've been here 13 years and really been working on creating this culture of supports. So the way that I have tried to make this the best benefit for all stakeholders involved, parents, teachers, students, other faculty, and our therapists, is for us to have an open dialogue and really that leading our conversation. So being curious, everyone has a seat at that table, and recognizing that in that open dialogue and that curiosity, we have to be leading with empathy on that journey. I kind of take it from the mindset of an archaeological dig. So every little piece that we uncovered somehow fits that total piece of the puzzle, which the puzzle is the student, right? And it's the student's brain typically. So from that, just having that frame of mind is able to build a better culture to support that student, because if we can have empathy with the parents and their journey and the student and their journey, we will be better seated at that table. Intentionality is another super important thing, is being intentional about our whole child approach. I know a lot of us use that term. It's thrown around a lot, but that really means kind of considering the where they're at and meeting them there, which requires us to have insight into and knowledge about the many different learning struggles that we see predominantly at our school or within our diocese. And from that information, it's important for me to make sure that our teachers and our parents and other students in class all have that information. So professional development or parent development or child development regarding learning differences. So for instance, dyslexia, ADHD, speech and language, dysgraphia. So those are kind of the ones that we see the most here at our school. Autism. So really that culture of supports, open dialogue, curiosity, learning about each other, meeting everyone where they're at, and then collaborating with outside experts, so therapists, so certified academic language therapists, speech paths, diagnosticians, OTs, PTs, BCBAs, and recognizing that when we do have these hard conversations, that parents may be coming from a place of fear, or teachers sometimes too. So recognizing that, and again, leaning in with curiosity more often, so that we are all here to support each other. That helps us be able to have a culture of strong supports for our students at a top level.
Wow, it sounds like a lot. I think that one of the things you noted, and you said it in a bunch of different ways, and I found that to be really insightful, is that communication. Whether it's the open dialogue, the communication between teachers and students, the communication between teachers and support staff, and the communication between the students and the teachers. That's so big in how we kind of work through this system together as a team. And I think that goes directly into kind of Barbara's role as a classroom teacher in all of this, and the biggest pieces of communication and observation and the data analysis that we all do.
Yeah, and I can just say, I've been at St. Austin's for many, many years, and I have seen this evolve into what it is now. And we are in such a better place than we were even, 5-10 years ago. So, and yeah, I owe a lot of that to Gabby and to Tara for bringing it on board. But this is such a big part of our culture. And, Tara and Gabby do a whole lot of check-ins with us. We have weekly team meetings where they, come in and ask us, are you having any problems with any kids? What can we do to help support that? We are given accommodation sheets at the beginning of every year for any kids who are identified. So we know going into the year who those kids are, what we need to do for them. One thing I'm most impressed about that we've implemented is that we try to catch the kids early, so that by the time they get to their into the intermediate grades, we already know what we're dealing with, and the kids still get pulled out for tutoring, etc. But the main piece is taken care of before they get into, hopefully by 4th grade, for sure by 5th. Also, I get to help plan the schedules for the school, and just the whole planning piece of all this is a huge piece. We have to check the schedules, we have to get with the CALTs, we have to get with the outside support services and plan all of that within the day. But in the day, we have what we call an enrichment period, where we meet the kids where they are, and whether that is to get pulled out for tutoring or whether they're in an enrichment program, like a gifted program. But all those kids are given what they need at that point. It's great. And yeah, and I think one of the most important things that we teach the kids, because it is such a community effort, is that we teach the kids to advocate for themselves. So the kids will come up to me as a teacher or whoever and say, I don't get this, or I need help in this. So we know how to help them. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's such great insight coming from the teacher's perspective. I think a big key in all of this too is that, we wouldn't be where we are at now, or we wouldn't be able to do these things and provide these systems of support as a culture in our school without parents. And Lauren's perspective is so key in us understanding and being successful in all of this.
Thanks, Gabby. I'm going to hit on kind of the same themes, and it's because that culture piece, it's part of the DNA at St. Austin's. But communication, as a parent, it feels alone sometimes in the beginning when you start to see your kiddos really start to struggle. But then as soon as this team wraps their arms around a child, in my case, it's been all 3 of my children, and you really start to share your lens and your perspective. And I got to hear Barbara's perspective, and I got to hear Gabby's perspective, and Tara's perspective, and my child's perspective. Having all of those different lenses to be able to look at what the situation is, what the experience of everybody is, and then how we come together in this open-minded way about testing different strategies, I think is really clear and helpful. And I think also as a parent, getting coaching from Gabby on hey, you seem to be implementing these strategies and they may not be working. Why don't we think about this? And then being able to talk to Barbara and say, I'm not going to do the homework assignment that way with my child. Are you okay if I do it this way? And her saying, yes, do it this other way, gave me the coaching and the reassurance that I needed. So having pretty fluid communication is really helpful. And then I think having empathy, what Tara talked about, is huge. My children, every child has a set of incredible strengths, and being able to recognize those and reinforce those while also supporting the areas that are a challenge was critical in helping all of my children build confidence and still work in these really critical areas that they needed help with. So I think it's that communication, being open-minded, getting feedback and coaching as a parent, and then also reminding these children what their amazing strengths are and giving them as many at-bats as they can get in those strength areas.
Absolutely. I think those are all really key points. And you hit on a couple different things in that this team effort and this ability we have to have all of the stakeholders in this process. And that leads to that second question. How are stakeholders included in the many stages of supports and interventions? And that's so key, because if we don't have everyone involved, including the student, we are not going to be successful. We would not be where we are today. Everything would be much different. And that's something that we bear a lot of weight on, is making sure that we have everybody on board. Ms. Ceballos, can you give us a few insights on that inclusion of stakeholders?
So what we, again, this process has been a very long process, as Barbara mentioned, and we just add a little bit every year. So we can't go from 0 to 100, as you know. So over the years, the 13 years, we have built up quite a lot of contacts with outside therapists, with certified academic language therapists, with diagnosticians or psychologists So we really have a process where we refer out in multiples because not everyone's good for everybody. We really try to understand the process because parents, as Lauren mentioned, it feels very alone, and we recognize that. That's part of that empathy. So if we know what parents are coming to, we know that we need to give them some sort of process. So we have, a referral sheet that gives them places that take insurance, that don't. And we kind of tell them how to start, because starting, I think, is the biggest obstacle. We all know how challenging that can be sometimes. So we make sure that the stakeholders that we feel are necessary in that initial stages of diagnoses, that the parents have a good roadmap. Then when it comes into once a child is diagnosed and is receiving whatever kind of therapy it is, it's not always on our campus. And so that's where it's really important for us to communicate with the parents about the village, as we call it, and knowing that we don't always have, while Gabby and I may have our master's in special education and specializing in 2 different areas, we don't have all the answers, and we're not there doing the therapy as much anymore. So we recognize that we have a lot to learn from these outside individuals. So we want that collaboration from an OT or a speech path. We invite these individuals to come in and observe for a period of time. We're in the room with them as well, just so we can all share notes of what we observe. So really inviting them into our school to collaborate, trying to break down those it's us against them kind of barriers, because that's not going to be helpful to the child, which is all of our goals. Yeah, so that was, in terms of just kind of looking at the top, how I feel like we bring our stakeholders into the entire process.
Yeah, and Tara, if I can just tag on to that, I am a parent of a child who was diagnosed here as well. And so I kind of had that teacher and parent point of view. And I can just say, Gabby and Tara really earned my trust. And I think that's so important for parents to trust us and to believe that we truly have their kids' best interests at heart. And I saw that with my own child. And, now she's going into now she is in high school, and she has taken everything that she's learned from our little community and taken that with her, and, making connections with her high school teachers and stuff like that. And I truly believe that she wouldn't have gotten that unless she had gone through what she did here at school. So I think that parent buy-in is huge. I think just earning that trust of the parents, but also the kids themselves. And, we talk about this all the time when we have team meetings and parent-child meetings, and just for those kids to see that we're all on the same team for them, it just makes such a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And both Tara and Barbara, you mentioned a village and a team. I often refer to and tell the kids and tell the families, we're on team so-and-so, we're on team Tara or team Barbara. And when we relate it to a team, and the kids, it's such an easy point of reference for them. They've either been in sports or they've been on some kind of team. They start to see us as partners and not just as my teacher and somebody that tells me what to do, or my parents who kind of direct me all the time. They start trusting us a little bit more. And I think for the parents too, making it more of like a real life example and allowing them to have other language that they can use. And I've heard parents, after I've kind of started using that language, say, we're on team Tara or on team Barbara, and all we're trying to do is support you and help you be more successful. Lauren, can you give us some pointers on how we've gotten stakeholders kind of included in this process?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have kind of laid out the methodology of the process. And I think as a parent, you're in the ring with your kid and you're watching them struggle in whatever facet it is. And to have you guys, warm hand reach out to say, hey, are you seeing the things that we're seeing? Or are you seeing something different? And providing that entree to share perspective. And then that list Tara mentioned of here's the references and the resources so that I, as the parent, can go make an appointment with someone that you guys already know and you have credibility with, and that knows what St. Austin's does and does really well. That's very helpful. And then being able to facilitate those assessment appointments, and then get the report back and sit down with Gabby and Barbara and walk through it and say, okay, now we're looking at it like a set of scientists. We have this hypothesis, we've developed these sets of strategies, let's test them, and then let's pivot, and then let's take what's working and then scale that into specials or other tutoring or the following grades. Now that it's been my third rodeo, I feel like, I get it and I know what to expect. But I think for a new parent, it does feel a little bit daunting, but just keep encouraging the parents to keep participating in the process, because you will go through it and you'll learn a lot through the process. But being able to lay that out and say, here's what to expect and here's the end in mind that we're striving towards, makes it more digestible and makes it feel like we're clear about the outcome and what everybody's role in the process is. And I think that's helpful, just clarifying stakeholder engagement from the get-go.
Gabby, if I could just add on a couple of things real fast. I know that Barbara mentioned advocacy, or someone did, and I think in the stakeholder process, we do wherever appropriate. And you can't say it's one particular grade, because it really depends on the child and their maturity. Is wherever it's appropriate for them to be included at the table. When we're talking about, more student-centric, this is happening in the classroom, we need you to, make some different changes. We include that child at the table as well. We do talk with the parents first, and then we'll include the student. And we talked about trust, and we all know trust is earned. And I think, again, talking about that culture of supports and bringing the stakeholder and that journey is that really, fine tuning your language, because sometimes it's the difference of changing a word, from dealing to, fostering. There's different words that we can use that are off-putting. So I think really it's thinking about the power of words and how that plays into getting everybody on the same page and on this team. And it's just remembering it's not easy. I wouldn't say that for us who've been doing it a long time, if we have 10 new families in a year, that they're all just going to jump on our train and, it's easy street train. It might be, we're lucky if it's 7 out of 10 that year, and there's 3 that we're working on. And it's a process, and not to get frustrated with the parents, to remember that empathy and the journey that they're on.
And Tara, just to throw in something, the other day, this was so weird. I saw a parent who was here several years ago, and this parent told me, we should have listened to you, because the advice that we had given them, they are now following in high school. And and they said, now they're doing it, and it's just made a huge difference in their kids' life. But that's okay.
That's exactly, that's okay. Right. I always say water on the rock. Eventually it will wear it away, and wherever that person hits the point where they reach out to do the right thing for their child is the right journey for them.
Right, exactly.
Well, I appreciate all of you coming in and having this kind of conversation. We've never done this before, and it was pretty insightful for me as the student sports specialist, and I'm sure for all of us. We talk and we meet together all the time, but I think being able to kind of talk about this gives us a really good understanding kind of as a whole picture, and we hope we were able to do that for y'all too.
Thank you.
Thank you all for a wonderful discussion. It was really great to have a window into how schools use interventions and supports for students who are struggling. We did have a few questions come into the Q&A, and I believe Gabby will be addressing those as they come in. But we did have a couple of questions come through registration that we have also posed to the panel. So our next question, our first question is, what are some of the struggles that you have encountered while implementing interventions and supports in your school?
All right, so I think I'll take this. I think that from my perspective, kind of the biggest struggle that we have is going back to the second question, getting all of our stakeholders on board for each of the conversations, parents, teachers, and students. I think oftentimes, sometimes parents are kind of shocked a little bit and hard to process all of this information. So getting the parents on board is really key. And even to this year, having struggles with getting parents on board, or them thinking sometimes that just time is going to, fix the problems or things that we're seeing right now. And then that also kind of coming into play and whether or not they choose to be in this process at all. And part of that too is also, those conversations are definitely more successful when the teacher's on board. But we've also had, circumstances and instances in where the teacher's not on board. And it takes either quite a long time to work through getting the teacher on board, or in some cases they may not be on board and they're just doing it to do it. We're incredibly blessed to have numerous teachers who are always on board and want to work through every single thing. And circumstances like with Lauren and getting on board, and she's worked through this 3 times with us and has done, a phenomenal job as an advocate for her children. So I think it just depends on the circumstance, but for me and kind of what I've experienced, it's for sure getting those stakeholders on board.
Yeah, to build off that, Gabby, just from a parent perspective, I think the pain for me as a parent had to get pretty significant. Like kind of to the point where I felt like I was at the end of my rope. Like I didn't know what else to do for my child. And it was frustrating, and I was using strategies that I used as a kid that weren't the right strategies for this child because they're a completely different human being. And I kind of had to hit my bottom as a parent and listen to Barbara and Gabby and Tara. And I mean, I point blank was asking Gabby at one point, like, what do I do? Because I see my child struggling and I'm struggling alongside them. And I know there are other parents who don't believe it's their child because their child's perfect and it's the school or it's the teacher or it's whatever. And I encourage parents to be open-minded and share in some curiosity and put the child at the center of all your decision making. These people are here in this village to help them be successful. We got to have some effective failure and some constructive conversation to really get at the root cause of what's going on. And my behavior as a parent has to change. My perspective as a parent has to change in order to best support that child. And quite frankly, the teachers and the staff who are helping support the child as well. So I think you're spot on about the parent buy-in and that process, and it's not easy. And I just kudos to you guys for sticking with us as parents.
That's great. And I see a lot of questions coming into the QA. I'm going to hopefully be able to address some of these towards the end of our discussion with the panel. But let me address our second question that we have is, would you provide an example of the process that takes place when a child is identified as struggling or needing additional supports?
All right, well, I'll take that question. So the process that we have established when a child is struggling or identified as struggling is, as we've mentioned before, we have weekly team meetings. So we are constantly talking about students that are on teachers' radars. Being a small school, we, myself and Gabby, have been watching students for many, many years. I mentioned how we are constantly improving our knowledge. Early identification, extremely important. So we've been watching these kids since pre-K. So by the time they really start to struggle, it's not always a surprise to us. But those team meetings is where we first talk about them. We bring our data, we bring our standardized benchmarking data. Teachers are bringing data and artifacts from the classroom, kind of, writing samples and spelling tests and math and different things. We, of course, would be talking with the previous teacher. At that point, we would ask the teacher to do maybe a few weeks, three or so weeks of tutoring. So asking the teacher to bring in the student after school. We work on a few different strategies that Gabby or I think that would really help benefit that student, to see if that is just a little bit of tweak in the instruction. And then at that point, we reconvene again at our weekly meeting We do some progress monitoring in that process as well on those skills that we feel like there's a gap. And if we're not seeing the improvement and we have enough data to suggest that there's something else going on than just instruction in the classroom, we then bring in the parents and we really kind of lay out all of the information and really talk about the characteristics that we're seeing and those kinds of areas of struggle. Again, dyslexia being our largest one, because it does make up the largest majority of learning differences, but there's always attention that we'll just be discussing. Sometimes it is autism. And so we really kind of lay out those characteristics that we see that the children are experiencing. We talk to the parents about, hey, is there any family history of anything? Because we know genetics are very strong and powerful. And then from that process, if our parents are magically on board, then we would recommend for them to get further assessment, further testing. So really a full evaluation. And that's where we give them a whole list of references to go out and get these full and individual evaluations or psychoeducational evaluations from the professionals in the area. And after that point, then they come back with the evaluation, and we kind of go over the findings together. Again, everything is done together as a team, and really kind of talk about what we're seeing and how it's impacting them educationally in the classroom, and then what kind of supports we can put into place. But also, you know, therapy is very important for us because we can only support so much, but if we're not remediating whatever that learning difference is, that is going to be where we're not going to be successful. So really lining up those appropriate therapies for whatever that diagnosis is.
It looks like we have a few minutes, and there have been a lot of questions that have come into the chat. One of them was, do you all work with LEAs or the child find process? And Gabby's responded, we do. We work with our local school district through the evaluation process if it's the parent's choice to do so. I am the school representative in this area and work with the LEAs and parents throughout the process. We attend meetings throughout the year at the district level to stay up to date on any requirements and contacts. So Gabby, thank you as we're moving forward to be responding to these questions. And I think she's moving forward and responding with other questions. And we will circle back with y'all later, hopefully in the presentation, if time allows, to be able to address those as well.